Now, with this type of war, we're back into the war on Iraq, and we've seen how that affected the US standing in the region, even almost until today.
The consensus in the Israeli public is overwhelming. And you can see how online the rare critics of this war and those who ask about the end game being viciously attacked.
To get the job done without having tested what the parameters of a deal might look like, I think is, of course, very dangerous.
Hello and welcome to Independent Thinking. I'm Bronwyn Maddox. This week we've got something a bit different. Because of the tension between Israel and Iran and the rising conflict, we've brought a live discussion about that to you. And we've brought voices from the Gulf and from the wider region, chaired by Galip Dalay, who works on Turkey for us.
Hello and welcome everyone. This is Galip Dalay. I am Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House. Today we will be unpacking the strategic objectives of both countries in this war and what is the possibility for diplomatic de-escalation. To do so, we have a stellar lineup of speakers. Here with us, we have Sanam Vakil, the Director of Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House. We have Ksenia Svetlova, who is our Associate Fellow at Middle East and North Africa Program. We have Renat Mansour, Director of our Iraq Initiatives. And we have Mohammed Baharoun, who is Director of the Dubai Public Research Centers. So we are very pleased to have you all here with us. Sanam, let me start with you. What is the implication of this war for Iran, for Iranian leadership? But most importantly, at this stage, what are the strategic objectives for Iran in this war?
Thanks so much, Galip, and great to be here today with a stellar team, as you described. This is a very most severe moment for the Islamic Republic, for its leadership. I think it's safe to say this is nothing short of existential, the most profound of all of the crises that the Islamic Republic has faced. This is an Iran and Israel war that I think is very much designed to decapitate the leadership of the Islamic Republic and degrade the nuclear and broader military capabilities of the regime, as it's oftentimes referred to. Over the past 4 days, we've seen deep Israeli intelligence penetration inside Iran that is both embarrassing, but designed to, of course, suggest broader aims. We've seen, of course, direct strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, specific damage to Natanz and to the Esfahan facilities. But there are many more on the ground that remain operational, with, of course, the principal and most important facility being Fordo, that is heavily fortified under ground and has yet to be taken out by the Israelis. And of course, there are questions whether that is possible by the Israeli military forces on their own. I think Iran has been exposed. Those of us who've been watching Iran for quite some time have known it is the weaker party. Its military capabilities have been asymmetrical, but it's of course been exposed to be really vulnerable in this moment. And we've seen attacks on energy facilities. I think psychologically, the war has also been very damaging in terms of confidence to a system of governance that has been struggling to maintain legitimacy. And the targeting of Tehran in particular has created real pressure on the system, on the state, has alarmed ordinary people. The high loss of life and the lack of protection by the government, the lack of facilities to manage this war, I think will have a longer term tail depending on how this all ends, or if and when this ends. To answer your second question, what are the goals here for the Islamic Republic? I think the primary goal is to prove their staying power. This is a test of time, of how long the Iranian system can resist as the weaker party. And if you do the math, I'm not someone that counts missiles, but if you do the math, of course, Iran can only hold on for so long. They want to avoid capitulation. So knowing that this will somehow end at a negotiating table, they want to be in the best terms possible. At the same time, they do want to inflict damage on Israel, and they want to demonstrate their, albeit limited capabilities to do so, that they can still do so. But the mindset is very much a David versus Goliath, and they see themselves as the David against the Israeli Goliath.
Do you see the possibility of regime collapse?
Well, of course, that's the $10 billion question that I spend hours a day trying to answer and anticipate. Collapse, I don't think, is the immediate outcome. I think what we can see is an unraveling over time. And I think that the Israeli objectives are not to be responsible for regime change, but to take credit for it when it comes.
Ksenia, very similar questions. What are the strategic goals that Israel is pursuing at this stage?
The declared goal of Israeli government, of the Israeli system, also the military, is of course the degrading of Iran's nuclear and ballistic programs. This is what we hear repeatedly from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, from military speakers, from Minister of Defense, and so on. Their goal is to weaken significantly Iranian regime, to degrade its capabilities, but then eventually to get it to the negotiation table. And perhaps to strike a deal that will be much more acceptable, by the U.S. and of course by Israel and by the rest of the world. In regards to the question of the survival of the regime, so there is a debate that's ongoing in Israeli political and diplomatic and security milieu about again, the possibility to achieve their proclaimed goals without the downing of the Iranian regime. I have to mention that there is an unbelievable consensus about this war. Unlike the war in Gaza, unlike the war in Lebanon, unlike any other war, perhaps that Israel waged so far. And the population is indeed very supportive, despite the deep divides in the society, despite the ongoing protests. There is this unbelievable support and also expression of resilience. You do hear from the ordinary people, yes, we are ready to pay the price, but only if you are ready to go all the way. All the way, it means including the toppling of the Iranian regime. But what we do hear from key opposition figures such as Barak is that if this war was designed with the hope that the US will join, but eventually it will not, then it's a serious miscalculation that can cost Israel a dear price, can even bring Iran closer to the nuclear bomb than today. In the end, the question is whether the nuclear capabilities were harmed. From what we understand, and it's only been 4 days of this war, they were not seriously harmed to the degree that we can really talk about game changer here. And the big question is whether they will accelerate, whether they will be able to, according to their capabilities, to accelerate this program after the war will end, whether it will end at the negotiation table or in any other way.
Renat, Iraq particularly, probably one of the countries that will be the most affected, potentially along the Gulf, with this war. So, how is the Iran's regional allies are responding to this, and more specifically, how the war is redefining Iraq?
This war, but definitely the post-October 7th climate is a Middle East that's changing. And many of the regional allies, many of the regional groups and regional states are uncertain where it's heading. So it's right now a mode of survival. Every group, every state is in survival mode. As they begin to see the unraveling of an old order and the kind of transition towards a new Middle Eastern order that no one knows where it actually will end up. So, when we talk specifically about the groups, Iran's traditional allies, be that Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has been weakened and degraded. Of course, the Assad regime was removed at the end of last year. Some of the PMF groups, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, for them, it's all survival mode. Similarly, in Iraq, where many of the PMF groups, including those linked to the axis of resistance, haven't, notwithstanding all the conflict we've seen, they've had less conflict. And in fact, the economy is booming. So they're making a lot of, money and they're being very successful in the Iraqi state. So as many of them tell us, it's not the time right now for resistance, right? Fundamentally. And this is all part of another change we've seen, which began at the end of Qasem Soleimani, when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by the US, which is the Iranian model began to unravel after then, in that it was no longer a top-down organization. The IRGC Quds Force no longer commands the axis of resistance, but actually it turned into a horizontal movement. So I think to conclude then, there is a changing Middle East order. There aren't no rigid, spheres of influence. There's many economic deals being made here and there, and the region is awash with economic deals. But sadly, these deals are happening at the same time when you have war. So something still fundamentally isn't there. You have so many deals and so much war, much more conflict in the region than in the last few decades. And so many of the groups, they don't know where this is going. And for them, again, to conclude, it's about survival.
Mohammed, so how do you see the Gulf's actors responding to this escalation? But more importantly, what roles can they play in de-escalating tension?
Let's talk first about the implications for the Gulf. Is this a conflict similar, let's say, to Gaza, where we can try and help with it, but we're not directly impacted by? I don't think this is the case right now. There is serious worries about the radiation in the Gulf. People in many, Gulf countries can actually see the missiles passing by, either from Iran to Israel or vice versa. This is now a clear and present danger. It is already touching national security of the region. This is not a conflict that we can watch on TV anymore. It's a conflict that is touching to us. And here comes the bigger implication for countries, particularly like the UAE. At a certain point, since Gaza started, we've been saying that, well, we wanted Israel to be a partner in peace. Israel wanted to be a partner in security. Today, Israel is becoming a source of instability. I mean, if we're afraid on getting water from our desalination because of a possible radiation, there is an ongoing direct attack on active reactors in Iran, then this is not a partner, neither in peace, neither in security. Actually, it's a source of insecurity in the region, and that is quite difficult. If the US participates, and of course, the participation of the US is based on bombing Fordo, and a possible impact of that happens, then things would become even worse. Another element, which is a strategic element, we will not see its impact today, but we will see it a little bit in the future, which is this continuous failure of the international global governance. There is no entity today that can stop Israel. It's not the UN, it's not the EU, it's not the GCC, it's not the Arab League, it's not the Islamic Cooperation Organization. No one can do that, let alone the US itself. Actually, the US now is participating. And this poses a bigger question. What type of fallback do we have when wars goes on? These are the type of questions the world has faced during World War I and World War II. These are the kind of questions that have changed the League of Nations to the UN. I don't know what is going to do. But the one thing that we know for sure is that when states and international organizations fail to do their job, they create a void. And it's individuals who fill in that void. So this is a problem where we could see a resurgence of things like Al-Qaeda, of things like Daesh in the region. It's a strategic implication that we might see in the future.
Mohammed, actually, it was very notable that you said that Israel was supposed to be a partner for regional security, but now it's becoming the source of regional insecurity. So what does that mean for the Israel-Gulf relations going forward?
Well, on the first part, we will possibly see something similar to what happened in Europe when the tariff came out. The entire discourse in Europe was about realignment. We used to depend on the US as a major ally, and now we are left alone. We will need to start thinking about strategic autonomy. These type of discussions is possibly going to be a reconsideration, reevaluation of our views about the region and the role of Israel. And I think possibly the UAE has been one of the forthcoming in trying to find a way for Israel to exist within the region, not only exist, extend its economic reach and cultural reach all the way across Asia, with the hope that this would convince Israel that there is a way for them to exist within the region once the Palestinian issue is solved. I think that's a major setback. I cannot say today, we don't want to make big speculations when an operation is going on, that this is going to happen or not.
Senem, one line of the argument that I see, for Iran to de-escalate, it has to further escalate first. So do you think that this probably might be the case with Iran, with the calculation in Tehran? Secondly, which other actors can play a decisive role in de-escalating?
Sure. Thanks, Galip. I think Iran is trying to escalate, albeit it is relatively boxed in. I mean, if you look at the scenarios, and I'm happy to list a few of them that are more openly discussed, there's not much Iran can do without risking further attacks, further isolation. If you look at the list, Iran can certainly start advancing its nuclear program. It could, of course, formally kick out inspectors. It could exit the NPT. It could, over time, and this is by no means something easy, it could break out. And so the weaponization aspect is still there, all not good options, because I think Iran is trying to preserve what leverage it can to then use it at the negotiating table. So in that area, I think Iran is relatively boxed in. Iran has threatened to close the Straits of Hormuz for as long as I've been alive. It has yet to do so, really because obviously that would harm Iran's interests, harm China's interests, and of course harm its neighbors' interests in the Gulf. And again, here it ties us to the threats of strikes and the blackmail Iran has used against its neighbors for quite some time. This is not 2019. This is 2025. Iran has worked to rebuild these bridges, and tensions still exist between Iran and the Gulf states. So attacking its neighbors would really be a case of last resort. And ultimately, I think these moves would also bring the United States into the conflict. And Iran is looking to have this really be an Israel-Iran war, not a regional war. So I think what regional states do worry about, and maybe don't want to say out loud, is an outcome where Israel is the dominant military actor in the Middle East, and they're going to be pressured by Israel over a longer period of time. Israel has certainly got that military prowess, intelligence that is very striking, and regional states have been very pleased to see Iran degraded, the proxies, the militias brought down to size, and the landscape is definitely an opportunistic one for the region. But at the tail end of this, I think everyone is still concerned about Gaza, about the issue of the two-state solution that looms very much on the horizon, and of course is not at the forefront of our minds.
Ksenia, there are quite many questions around the specificity of the Israeli expectation from US in terms of, does it the US directly join in the war, or is it the capability providing the B-2 bunker buster bomb? So what are the exact expectations from the US? And secondly, how this war is affecting the war on Gaza itself as well. So how is the picture there is evolving?
I think that the minimum that the Israeli leadership expects now from the US is not to stop the Israeli offense against Iran before Israel is done with all of its targets, before it believes that it completed some of the missions. The maximum edge of the scale is, of course, full involvement of the US in this war, the use of the B-52, the anti-bunker bombs, the larger bombs, the mega bombs, the mother-of-all bombs. We remember Trump's expressions about that specifically. I think there is this growing realization in Jerusalem that nobody is in a hurry. Nobody is in a hurry in Washington to do that. So I think that the answer on that, what is the effect of the war in Iran, on the war in Gaza? Well, unfortunately, at the very first day of the warfare with Iran, there was this quote that belonged to somebody from the military command that right now the war in Gaza, it's not the first priority of Israel, it's secondary at best. The first priority is, of course, Iran.
Without the US involvement, to how long Israel can sustain this military confrontation with Iran, given that Iran's tolerance for pain probably is higher than that of Israel, because the country has been in war under the sanctions for almost now half a century. So how do you see the threshold of pain for Israeli politics and society when you compare to for the Iranian one, if we are in for a longer game?
It was believed indeed that for years that Israeli leaders actually prefer not to go to war. And that was something that Netanyahu also said repeatedly. But it seems that after 10/7, the threshold had changed. And also the public perception of how should you treat the unfinished business. The consensus in the Israeli public is overwhelming. And you can see how online the rare critics of this war and those who ask about the end game being viciously attacked, not only by the supporters of Netanyahu, the traditional forces that we know, but also by anybody else, who finally want to feel this satisfaction, this pride that Israel traditionally had, taking pride of its military, something that was put under doubt after 10/7.
Mohammed, there are few questions in terms of how this war is affecting the region's approach and perception of the US. So particularly how this war is affecting the Gulf's view of the US and then its approach to Russia and China.
They've talked seriously, obviously, about an assassination of Ali Khamenei, which means practically a regime change. So these are objectives that are very difficult to achieve without huge repercussions in the region. Now, the question that you've asked about Iran and China, Iran and India and China and others, and I would bring in Brazil in this, I would bring in South Africa, a huge number of countries, what we call the global South. These countries are taking a position, that looks at Israel as a potential danger now. If Iran used to be the destabilizer, it is not. It's actually playing according to international law. They're saying that we are having a proportionate response to an attack. Israel says that they're having an attack that is trying to preempt a certain program, but it is an unprovoked attack in international law. So these are type of new dynamics that we haven't seen in the past. And it's definitely going to affect the way people are looking at what security means. It will affect what does international security. If US used to be the guarantor of international security, now with this type of war, we're back into the war on Iraq, and we've seen how that affected the US standing in the region, even almost until today.
I want to get what a deal would look like. Senem, would you like to step in?
This is where President Trump and the US administration's influence is certainly going to be important. If a Vance Witkoff meeting takes place with the Iranians and with Gulf support to build out the contours of the deal, a trial run for a deal, that could really open the window and see if the Iranians are serious. And then if the Iranians are not serious, obviously then you can all go in and pile in and get the job done with the United States. But to get the job done without having tested what the parameters of a deal might look like, I think is, of course, very dangerous, particularly for all of the prognosticators of regime change, knowing the history of regime change, and, of course, the uncertainty on the horizon.
Thank you very much. Venat, almost exactly the same question. How do you expect US presence in the region to be affected by what is happening?
We just published this report on Accept, and last year, 2024, had the highest number of conflicts since World War II. So the number of conflicts each year is increasing. And I think the post-October 7th Middle East, Israel's violence, as well in Gaza and Palestine, elsewhere, and the war with Israel and Iran are all parts of this global transformation where human rights, international law, terms are no longer relevant. And in the global South, As Mohammed is saying, many people are no longer seeing there being either a US security architecture or even this rule-based order that supposedly governed the world. I mean, this is all out the door. And, Israel, both in terms of military is showing the world what war will look like, but also in terms of sort of international law is showing the world what war will look like as well. And I think, from the region then, yes, there's still, many of this in the region, especially the countries that we cover, are no longer buying this post-World War II idea of spheres of influence. You're either East or West. You're communism or democracy, good, bad. All of these binaries don't work anymore. This is a region, where, yes, it's awash with economic deals, yet at the same time, it's embroiled in wars. So something is not happening here. Peace settlements aren't leading to sustainable peace. And so relationship with China, with India, with others become really important as the region begins to see where this global order is moving towards.
Well, thank you very much. Once again, I would like to thank all the speakers and all the participants. That has been, as I said, like a quite lively discussion about quite a concerning and distressing developments in the region. So hope to see you for our other events, webinars, publication around the subject. So please keep following our works, both through our social media channels, but through our website. So hope to see you for a next event soon. Thank you very much again.